Okay, here's a touchy subject for just about everybody, so I thought I'd talk about it. It's just kind of my viewpoint on Jesus, let's say, and um, the way I think that really went down, and if he's real, if there really was a Jesus, or if he even ever existed at all. It's a complicated answer, and it can't be answered with just one word like yes or no. If I had to, then I would say no. If I was allowed to put an asterisk on it and give me a few minutes to describe my answer, I would probably say yes. It's kind of strange answer in itself, but in that fact, um, there's an idea that whether or not even somebody named Jesus ever existed. Well, at that time that we're talking about, there was no J. So one way for me to get out of it real easily here is just to turn around and tell you that there was no Jesus in Judea on or about the time that he's described as being there in his life at his age and so on. In fact, that's a symbolic number two, and it's supposed to collect things together. So one easy way out of the fact of did he ever existed is ha 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 that. Also the fact that, as I've been able to show you over the years now, where every once in a while I'll get back into the Bible and pick away at it a little bit. And I'm not doing it to try to destroy the Bible or do anything. I've shown a lot of same mythology of other people that surround this and stories, and how funny how that story kind of sounds like one you've heard, and that it goes back much earlier. So pieces and components of this come from elder folklore, let's say. Even some of it comes back, apparently, as some people have described, before the end of the last ice age, or they wouldn't have certain concepts with it. So it's kind of strange, and it shows you that if we were to have like Library of Alexandria or what they might have in the Vatican, things along that line, we might have a total different idea of what was going on during that time. In fact, once you get deep into it, you'll actually realize that people had a lot of knowledge that we didn't give to them up to a modern time. In fact, I've shown you a whole lot of that here recently, but also in the past, where, I don't know, let's just pick any topic. Roman arches. The Romans invented that and they perfected it and everything. No, no, I did a video where it shows, well, here's some buried making the chamber roof in a and the awning and opening of an ancient Sumerian tomb in the Wayback Machine, dating to just after the pyramids were built in that era. And it's made exactly like that with a keystone in it and everything, like they had already had that concept figured out. In fact, if you look at it, they made it with sacred geometry and stuff, and then turned around and somebody built something like that and probably walked up on top of it and stood on it and jumped up and down and was like, wow. To get it to stick together or build it exactly right, though, you get that keystone off a little bit, it'll all try to give over time. Or the fact that they have trigonometry. Now, you can look it up on my channel, or you can just look it up in general on Google or on YouTube and see other people have made videos about this. I made a video right after they'd come out with the knowledge of figuring it out. I had the stink of it before, but I wasn't, into it in that depth, and I also am not some like mathematician major that can turn around and say, this is like a trigonometry formula, but it's weird, and they come up with a weird answer, and oh yeah, their stuff's based on 6, so let me hold on, pull out a calculator here and cosine on a tangent of da 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 da, and come up with the right answer. But that's not really getting to the point here on the Jesus type thing. But I've shown you recently another couple of layers of the onion where the Greeks definitely had a hand in the Bible, and then a lot of theirs actually comes from the Sumerians, i.e., Dumuzi becomes Adonis, and the same story of how winter and spring comes to life, and so on like that we talked about and made a couple of videos about recently. But also the fact that this is all written in the stars and it goes through another layer of that. And while there's Sumerian stories that are all written in there, and we even a long time ago went through the Epic of Gilgamesh, and then I showed you a couple of other stories in there and hinted to the idea that this is in the Bible and a few other people's mythology, astrotheology, if you will, and we know we had planets, and everybody knows that planets were like worshipped as gods and stuff, but they don't really realize that it was all about the constellations and everything too, and it's really about how the horoscope kind of came up and things like that, you know, tarot cards and stuff like that. But did this Jesus ever exist? Well, an easy way to say the answer to that is not the one that we're led to believe that he is. I mean, if you really got deep into a church that was Calvinist or something even more out in left field here, you would, of course, believe that everything was true to point, that nothing was allegory in there, and even the parables were about something that they've said is a truthism and so on. And you know, while it's a beautiful book, I mean, there's a lot of fantastic things in there. Preachers can actually sit there for years and talk about all kinds of stuff and leave out the stories of the talking donkey and other things, and a lot of killing people off, and they rarely, if ever, go through the Bagats in that situation, or go through all the laws that are told to Moses after the cow event and that everybody knows about, or that everybody was supposed to kill each other and stuff because of what they had done, or a lot of other things that they don't describe, or the fact that that whole concept that was going on was a switch from Taurus to Aries. And whenever they show up there, you know, they act like they weren't worshiping that God that was ended up being on the mountain, you know? So something is strange about that statement, because if you look at it, they really thought that they were. Well, lo and behold, you're not told this concept, and you take one or two sentences out here and there, and you'll never realize it, that they are talking about different gods and different things. And it's a weird story of man's search for God. And then he turned around and took the best of all and threw it all back in and made it a different thing. But I guess most anybody can understand, if they get into anything in the Bible, that the God of the Old Testament is not Jesus. And strangely, I've been able to show you recently with that Sumerian zodiac and all the stars that are made into images and they're constellations, that whenever they go through the story of Jesus, they're using the same ones quite often, but not always, by the way. And yet, that's the ones that I've shown you too in some of the stories end up being Yahweh. It also ends up being Enki in the story of the Sumerians and stuff, but also it's Poseidon or Neptune. There's the Kraken right there. Well, yeah, I thought that was Tiamat. Yes. And it's also Yam, the sea god of the ancient Canaanites, and so on else. No one knows why they turned around and were Canaanites, and they had all of these beliefs, and then they left into captivity for like 10 years and then get freed by Cyrus the Great and set back in. But whenever they did so, they ended up putting a new name on the storefront. No longer was it Kmart, but it's something else. Shelves are in the same place, they have the same stuff, really, but they portray it in a different way. And it's another story written in the stars, as I've shown a lot of the things here recently, in Jesus walking on water. Just like when we went through the Old Testament, and especially at the Sinai moment, and the Exodus, which I even did a series on, which was like, what was it, 8? Or is that the one that was 12 long? It was quite deep, but it was one of those ones like the series I did just recently, trying to celebrate another 1,000 subscribers as I click it along here. Usually do that, and I do a yearly thing if I can. Irregardless, so if we take out some of these things that we realize are just mythological stories, and or making a comparison where Jesus can do something just like that guy does, but he does it better or easier. Anything you can do, I can do better. My God can beat up your God. If you've ever thought upon that line, I guess, or anything. But strangely, if we were to take all of the things that people say out of it, you'd have problems. You see, if you get into the idea that everybody is right on the wrongness of the Bible. I mean, I've seen people get into the point of how many discrepancies they have in the Bible, and it gets to like 270 something. And it's just we're over here where he says a different number than that over there, the person that he's talking to, or, you know, some of them are real important sounding, though, too, at the, and was it Numbers and Kings both? No, it's Samuel. They tell them to count the number of people of Israel, and that they're, you know, they were going to be Yahweh's God. And so a weird statement there is that there are a lot of other gods, and Yahweh is going to be the main one for these people. It was the people of Israel. A lot of people don't catch it, but if you'll read both versions there in Samuel and the other one of them tells for these people to end up counting them. The other one says for Satan to count the other one. And one of them is the adversary, and one of them is the actual God here. So it's like, what's going on here? What are they trying to say in that? I've said before that I believe that the Greeks and the people that put their hand in it kind of already knew that the world was round, but yet they still portrayed it in an ancient way. Now, whether that was meant to be in some way or another, but just like that moon up there, they knew we were round, but we were huge. They had figured out the circumference of the earth before this date and point. I mean, I don't need to go through into all that, and the Greeks had it figured out, and apparently the Sumerians did way back when. That's why we still have 360 degrees and so on. It's a circle, or we're on a flat circle. That's how they drew maps. But whenever I draw you a map on a piece of paper, you don't think we're living on a thin shell of a piece of paper floating on top of some water or anything like that. But the depiction of a water world that we were in under a bubble, and that concept was said by some people, you know. And I think that if this was done as an auto-sabotage, that somebody was supposed to figure out this stuff was BS. And the secondary form of it, or the second coming, was the New Testament. And in that they have Jesus, and his second coming was actually Titus and the Roman Empire and so on. I've talked to my brother about this, but you know, I try not to do it too much anymore because it really starts destroying his faith. And it's not like I want to attack my brother in any way. One of his outstanding attributes is that he is a deacon in his church. He learned sign language to be able to talk and sign for them, do all kinds of things. And I don't want to disrespect that necessarily, but he's agreed, and that he goes, oh yeah, I know all about that. And he agrees with it, that the stuff in Revelations and all that's talking about Rome and everything else. But I put it together, and I tried to show him the Flavian signature, but I don't think he watched much of it before he realized, no, this is going to destroy it, and he just turned it off. I applaud anybody who's searching for the truth enough to try to find it and actually gets past the point, well, if I step out here third person, not as myself and the way that I was grown up to think, just like you are in a kid and there's Santa Claus and that gets destroyed and you're left over with a Jesus concept for your adult life. If we step out third person and realize that people that live all their lives as Hindus have a different idea, you know, and people that are Jainism and all the different religions of the world, and how you get this concept, and they're all wrong, but I'm right. Well, in the Bible, it talked about all these other ones, and the only one that's supposed to believe in this stuff was these one people, and it tries to pinpoint it like that. Then it talks about 12 tries, so it gets confusing. In fact, there are places where it has such radical discrepancies, it's confusing. And one would say that you'd have to think they went through that and fixed it a long time ago, but luckily they had this edict where not one single iota will be changed. An iota is a little hash mark which gives you a vowels because they only put the consonants down there. So, like, you're not even supposed to change an I to an E. Even like in modern, English, we're using an I and E, and depending on if you're or we're using an I or E or whatever, and it could go either way and really not change the word too much. In fact, some of our slang is using it incorrectly a little bit there, and other ones is using from French derivative words and all kinds of things and Proto-Indo-European roots, so it has different linguistics that go along with it than we actually have now and have derived this language we're speaking now out of. But that's really radically off in left field. Go back here again. So I guess again I would say something as simplistic as the thing that you believe is Jesus, or I don't know who you are. Let's say that again. The people that you're led to believe that were Jesus and his disciples and things like that, and did they really there? Were they even the ones that wrote it and so on? And I tell you, I live on the back of giants here because there are people, and I watch videos sometimes, but I tire on it. It starts wearing on my mind, having to load up all these things into my mind and try to start stretching fabrics. But I get real excited still if I find a piece of a puzzle, and it really doesn't have to be that much anymore. I feel like I've gone through all the fireworks that there possibly could be. But then again, I found out here's another layer of that onion, here's another layer of that onion. But I still get excited about just one simplistic little thing like, aha, here's a connection I didn't know about. Like when I was talking about the Greek thing, that I watched the videos there, and that guy had some that I didn't even know existed, and he's got a book where there's like 27 or something in there, and I'm like, wow. I only had a few, but I thought there was only a few in there, but I didn't know the total connection to this Greek tale that you're talking about in that moment. But isn't that amazing? And people would say, well, the Old Testament's untouched and the New has got that stuff on it and it's all full of Gnosticism anyhow, regardless of what they tried to do, or I don't know how they tried apologetic for it, but that's not true at all. In fact, pretty much the reverse is in effect. In fact, whenever Jesus comes into the temple with the Sanhedrin and he writes on the sand on the ground and everything, it really blows the people away. Everybody's always wondered what he tried to do there. There's a lot of people that talk about what possibly happened there, but one thing's for sure. Whenever he calls out and he says, before Abraham, I am, the linguistics there puts it is where he's talking about Ea at the time, which would have been Enki that we're talking about, and also perhaps giving an idea where that's all written in the stars and so on. And it's possible that he didn't write words down there, but he draw dots, and then all of a sudden he turned and made a dot-to-dot picture, and then he said that words to him or something along that line. Did this even ever happen? Did that moment ever happen? Did these other moments ever happen? Did somebody rise from the grave? You know, if you read the 4 different Gospels that are the main part of the New Testament, you get 4 totally different accounts. In fact, apologetics have just made a living off of trying to go around and try to make up stories about how, well, they weren't there that day. They were gone fishing. Went and visited their wife, which they apparently totally just left. Just followed Jesus like, durr. Didn't try to get their wife to go or anything. Oh, no. We're not going to talk about that. Can't be any of that. In fact, Jesus actually tells you to hate your family and leave them and everything, but they don't tell you that one in church. I've seen where somebody shows that and they show a sermon and how when they get right there, they usually close the book over and start talking about something else and then go, woo, here's a smoke show, and then da-da-da. But if you just read down about 2 paragraphs, all of a sudden Jesus says this thing that they don't tell you in church. And that's not the only one. But there was a guy named King Esus of Edessa, and apparently he helped fund the Jewish revolt on that. And once that was found out, they killed him and supposedly crucified him along with other people. And some people have made the comment or connection that that actually was the one that Josephus talks about, because that's the end of the Jewish wars there. And that secretly he's writing that in. In fact, they had enough respect for the man that they put that into there. Well, there's another guy whose name was Isis, along before that was also in the Jewish revolt, and he tried to come off as a Messiah, and he got killed. But then again, he became somewhat of a martyr. But there was also a guy, Judas, and a conflagration on words make him Iscariot, and that's Judas Iscariot. And that's actually Jesus, because some of the stories that are in the Bible actually go along with what they tell you happened with him. Little fragments of tales and stuff, and what was going on with that, and there's just like a twist. It's like, I've kind of heard this before. And the stars of Bethlehem and the idea of the virgin birth and all that concept, a lot of people don't believe that anymore. But that something happened, something fantastic. Well, if you look at the Gospels, woo, that went bright there. If you look at the Gospels, it actually, one of them will tell you, or two of them, I guess, tell you that whenever he was born at birth, he was king or whatever. One of the other Gospels tell you that he didn't turn into Jesus until he got transfigured, right? There's another one where he gets transfigured or turned into a Son of God at his baptism. Isn't that right? So they really can't even get their crap together, but they tried to mend it, and a lot of people have looked at these and said, well, John came first or whatever, and then Matthew, and here Mark and Luke, and so they went through kind of, actually are kind of apologetics for it. But if you want to, you can just pick the best parts out of it running through the story, and you can get an incredible look at Jesus that's fantastic. But also, every time you flip, you're also kind of avoiding these stories here, and the fact that it doesn't work out, and it doesn't say the same thing. In fact, if you were to go through each one and read what it says to a point, and then starts to go to something else, it's kind of a left field thought, then go, okay, we're going to read the next one until it gets to that same point. Funnily, you won't find that same point, but in two of them, and something else happens right after that that never happened, and something before when you were first reading it is not mentioned over here, and not mentioned over here either, but there's something else. And here's this thing. Well, you can do that with a Christmas tale. It takes putting 2 1/3 of the stories together that you get told at Christmas and Shepherds by Night and all the thing and all the people's coming and so on like that. That takes you pieces. You won't get that out of one person's story here. And they're supposed to be all connected and know these things and got together, and don't believe they didn't talk about it afterwards and all the stuff that went on. But see, it wasn't quite invented yet. So it's vague for a reason. If you look at under that point, you'll actually get more close to a correctness of how this was actually created. Was there a person? Well, sure. There might have been a person that they hung like a martyr situation, along with a lot of others, by the way. You know, Jesus said that a lot of people are going to come in his name, da-da-da-da. And, of course, this is looked at as effort, but also before that happened a lot. But also another way of thinking about this, one theologian said a long time ago in a video I watched that was on a VCR. If you don't know what that is, look it up. But it dates how long ago it was. But somebody talking about how that moment was really something that kind of showed it where it all fell apart for him. But let's continue here. Hold on. A lot of people have noticed certain things, and I've watched a lot of these theologians go after this stuff. I watch them rather frequently, or whenever I just want to get into the Bible and go, yeah, I haven't either talked about this or shown it explicitly enough, made a comment, and I may have even actually said and other things and thought it in my mind and never brought it up as an actual true topic. Some of these things I feel like are just small little pieces of the puzzle. Other ones are real important. If we were making a puzzle out of this picture that we're looking at here in the background, if I was to find a piece that was yellow and, oh, that's the moon, or here's some certain clouds, finding the stars would be incredibly difficult. If they had them brighter and dimmer like it really more looks like to us because of light scattered, or at least a little bit, you don't have to be too far close to a campfire and you'll get that effect where you pretty much see the constellations. But it'd be hard to figure out. That sand area would be somewhat mysterious, but that rock formation and everything on the left would be, or from middle to left, and the person, that'd be pretty easy to find, and so on like that. So you'd think of those as being the ones that had a gold star next to them, as I've talked about a few times, or a silver star. You give them somewhat of weight, and some of these things are small, some of them are real large. Once you've seen enough of it, you actually do have times where I have myself thought, well, some of this I might be over analyzing or over applying. Like whenever I get hung up on mythicism and that concept where it comes from, I start to see everything coming from something like that. Whether I can or can't make the exact connection. And I think, well, maybe that's not the connection. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Oh, you know what? Maybe it's written in the stars somehow. Usually that comes along with weird stories because they all alternate words and something thrown in out of nowhere, it seems. But also that same effect has been found whenever they throw in a Greek tale. And sometimes they'll put it in as a parable or something, but other times you're like, Jesus just walk along and he says this or that, which I guess would be somewhat of a parable too. But there are other times where you can compare what he does to what somebody else did, and he does it a little better and a little easier in healing people and raising the dead, which is actually, you know, they used to show him with a wand and stuff. He's supposed to be a magician pulling off these, deals just like a faith healer does nowadays in some kind of magic show. And they used to do this stuff back there and try to get people to believe in stuff for it too. And it worked on some people, just like the Greeks had special apparatuses hooked up to the doorway and things that would give you just enough water to wash your feet and hands before you came in, so you could be pretty much cleansed or clean whenever you go into church. I mean, come on, we still have that Sunday best idea with like, come on, people, don't come in stinking to church and stuff. That's also another reason why they swung around incense. But then when you find out what they generally had in that incense, you're like, hey. But they had doors that opened magically and all kinds of things for people, and that was supposed to have been looked like as God's magic. But then there were people behind the scenes that knew exactly what was going on, and I think that went the way with everything that's in the Bible whenever they wove it together. That in its essence, they would have had to have known that they were writing something that was bullshit, but it was actually written in the stars. And so one could justify it because that's where the other people have their tales at. So, ta-da. It's that simple. And when you get a bunch of Gnostics together and they start with this idea and multiplying things, you can imagine what they came up with. There's a secret I've talked about a few times, but Gnostics used to have to take a tale like this and write another tale, and generally what the concept was to weave two things together as one. Well, that's what a lot of the little biblical tales are shown to do, but then again, that was going on, it appears, all the way back in like Sumerian tales and all this other stuff, where they have alternate forms. And the Egyptians, and they had an earlier form of this, and they had a different tale, and there's a few tales of creation, there's a few tales of this, that, and the other. Well, the Bible only has one, and they're sticking to it. And they're not going to put anybody's image in that sacred niche. It's empty. Well, isn't that funny? That means nobody's there. Well, that same niche is supposed to connect to the square of Pegasus up in the sky, as I've shown in other videos. Did Jesus ever exist? Not the one that you're led to believe that did. He existed in the minds of people who were setting a standard for people, and I guess in a strange way that got us to where we are now. But we can also look back now in our mass civilization that we have going on and look at how archaic a lot of those beliefs are and were even then as it starts to fade out. And I believe that Christianity won't last but a few more generations, and then there'll be people holding on to it, and stuff. And unless something happens, of course, something falling from the sky and causing more damage than we've seen in our recorded history here would easily set people back, and all of a sudden they would start telling you that this happened again, and he was mad because we quit worshiping him, and all these things. Quit worshiping who? The great snowball flower in the sky and the outer Kuiper belt? I mean, what are you going to try to pull off here? Did the God of the Old Testament ever exist? Well, in the stories we can look through that, and you almost can just go, well, people believed this at that time. It makes you want to believe it. When you get deep into church, it makes you want to believe it, and you look at it in a way where you go, oh, well, back then people thought like this, I guess, and we were smarter than that now. Well, are you smart enough to see through the bullshit of the whole thing? I.e., once you see that, once you end up pulling back the curtain and you actually see the Wizard of Oz there, and then you look at the thing in the image on the screen that's supposed to be protected, and you're like, can you put that together? I did long ago, and then all of a sudden I kept seeing more and more things. I left the Bible alone for decades, pretty much, and rarely, if ever, touched upon any concept of it or hashing back over how Noah wasn't really true and so on, and didn't want to really mess with it because so many people are believes in it, and it's hard to even have conversations or videos. People get, asinine in comments and stuff. I think that's weaned down a whole lot more lately. I thought this situation that we were in might cause it to be, a whiplash back or not, or who knows. Looks like it's still faltering. Did he ever exist? Not the guy that you think. That's somebody we put up on a podium, and it's actually a mix of a whole bunch of the good and so on out of all these other people. It's an amazing story. It's got that blended into it. Stories from the stars, stories from ancient Greek stuff and so on, but I've shown you where some of those come from the stars too. But in comparison, it's weird, but even the Old Testament or the New Testament in many ways is trying to make a comparison to what other beliefs are around at the time and how they're different. But in doing so, they show you how much that they are really feeding off of that concept whenever they invented their version of everything that was going on around them at the same time. In my mind, if God ever did anything, he caused some great sneeze that probably caused him to die in the first place, but in doing so, he created the universe. That's an esoteric view on it. Other people believe that our universe was created from another one sucking into a black hole someplace, that is so far out of our vision we don't even know it. We're just one little speck over in a corner of a slowly expanding and ever fastly expanding universe that's getting so far apart, as I talked about in one of my other videos around Christmas last year, I guess, that was explained that if we went to 2 other galaxies right now because we're expanding by right now, if we left right now, we could only go to 5 or 6 different ones possibly, and it would be a generational spacecraft where they would go but they would never come back. By the time they started trying to come back, they would almost be sitting in space trying to zoom away from what portion is happening there that's scooting away from us as we're scooting away from them. Other than Alpha Centauri, we don't have much options. In a few generations, we might have something that actually gets us to the point of faster, and I've talked about a few ways that could happen and so on, but I don't think it's really feasible. Slingshotting somebody around the sun, and trying to do an idea, but I kind of had that idea before Star Trek tried it. Of course, they are able to go back in time and stuff whenever they do it, and that's a whole different aspect. Did Jesus ever exist? Yeah, I'm going to say it again before we get out of here. I know there's a few aspects that I haven't even looked at, or a layer of onion I've even peeled off and go, well, look at this. Problem is a lot of things. Problem is the discrepancies, just in itself. The fact that there's no recorded history of it, that there was at least 30 well-known authors at that time that were in the area at that time, and if something incredible like these people came up out of the tombs, like it says in one of the Gospels, and they all came to life as Jesus rose up and walked through the streets, and everybody was amazed. Nobody ever said anything about it. They were so amazed. Funny how you don't find anything written about it until after these people were not there. In fact, if they were supposedly wrote it at the time that people think of, then they couldn't have been witness to Jesus in the first place. And the Gospels are not written after the people they gave credit for. And if you look at those names, they're very Indo-European, very Northern European, or Japhethic, if you want to put the name on it out of the Bible idea and concepts. But I've done other videos about Japheth and the reality that Noah's kids would have all been related, because one of them's blue-eyed. They all could have been. Oh wait, here's the Sumerians' blue-eyed statues. Oh wait, here's the earliest Egyptians and even pre-dynastic that has lapis lazuli eyes that come from Sumeria and Afghanistan. There's a bunch of connections that go on there and everything, and that's kind of reality, and I like dwelling in that more than to tear apart something that's like a fairy tale. In fact, I try to show you the truth and reality of fairy tales. Whenever I do so with the Bible, though, it seems like I'm tearing something up. Like I could simply go, one of the ancient rituals for somebody to die was to burn them up. Cremation, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, that's where we get that from, but also ash is somebody famous in Proto-Indo-Europeans, by the way, and trees are named after him. And they used to put him up on a dais, like you see in Conan the Barbarian, or maybe even in Star Wars, where they burned people away, like you think of Vikings putting on boats and things like that, and their smoke would go up in heaven, that spirit, that thing that would go on up into there. And that's woven into our idea of hell, along with volcanoes and all that concept that happened to people that, like the island of Santorini there's left over from a giant explosion, which a lot of people make connections to a Atlantean tale if you just take 1 0 off the projected years that are said about that. But I guess I've gone off in the left field a bunch of times here. It's a great book. It's woven into all kinds of tales here, and if you were to take out all the great things, and even the Old Testament where you have Moses, and I guess the best thing or coolest thing that ever happened there was that he smacked on a rock and made water come out of it. That's pretty important on people in a desert, but he's not alone in somebody who did that same action. But how about crossing the Red Sea and it parted and all that? That's the thing right there. And lo and behold, he didn't ever say that. If you look in ancient Hebrew, it says the Sea of Reeds, the Reed Sea. And this makes correlation to the people of the Hyksos that came in. See, and I guess here's something cool on the way out, and I'll throw some fireworks in this nighttime display you're looking at here. For what the Hyksos did was whenever they came out of captivity with those people, they were never in captivity. They twisted around everybody and played the victim. Yeah, you'll notice that the people are supposedly connected with the Old Testament have played the victim quite often, but that's not for the scope of this vid. But lo and behold, there's a reality point that's right there, that instead of them taking over Egypt and then later getting kicked out, the story is that they were enslaved by Egypt, and then their God that was so special that they hadn't even quite come up with yet, that hasn't even happened at Sinai. At the burning bush, Moses gets greeted by somebody that first says they're an angel of the Lord, then turns around and tells you that they're God. And then that God says that, the patriarchs before him didn't know him as Yahweh. He knew him as El Shaddai. Well, El Shaddai is actually hooked up to Inanna, and it's the goddess of the two mountains, and that's Gemini up in the sky. That's part of Mother Nature and everything, and it quite often is used as the mother goddess situation. And then we have Virgo, the maiden. other things that are used to make these stories that we've been talking about recently on this. And I blend that with new topics that come up and anything new, but I also have slowly through the years here tried to rehash what I did on the other website, and instead of talking in an outdoor format half the time or sitting in a living room just smoking cigarettes and talking away trying to show something, I've tried to show a little more visuals with it. Wish I could have shown you 10 different videos of the background here, but I guess leaving this up all the time is something neat, because we do come back to this celestial astrotheology quite often. Is the Bible built on it? No, but yes. Oh, well, it's all about it? No, because there's other tales. Well, some of those are written in the stars too, but there's other tales and comparisons, all kinds of things. New Testament is Titus's campaign, written as he went down here through it, and whether you believe that was written fakely as it happened to try to match the Jesus tale in some kind of sick way. If you look up the Flavian signature, you might see it one other way, but you would actually still maybe eventually get the idea, well, did they fake the Josephus tale off something that had happened before? Did they conflagrate 4 or 5 things together and make Jesus out of it? Well, it looks like a little more than that. There's a lot of comparativeness going on in this whole concept of him. And a lot of it's taken from the known world at the time. And I said before that they're putting it all together and what some people did, but you're made to think that that's the way people did everything, but it's not. It's not at all, actually. There were people that had these problems that they went through in the Bible and things like that happened, but it wasn't actually put on one people, and thus tales that they tell you doesn't happen. They in the tales, just like the one of Moses going in a basket, which is Sargon of Akkad, they've kifed other tales into it, like Jacob's massive campaign through going and kicking ass like a warrior, and or Joshua. And you see, all the Gnostics, all their books were about Joshua, but Yeshua that's Jesus. Well, no, that's Joshua. That already happened. So you were looking for a second coming for Jesus in the first place, and then the Greco-Roman guys put it all together and they go, this guy was here. And then they wrote it after the fact, and they were like, this already happened, and all this bullshit went down, and they put some people in there, names and places and dates, and, you know, after you beat it out of people enough times, you can get the idea that this really happened. And it's amazing. It's an amazing tale, an amazing book. It's had keep people under a veil of mist for nearly 2,000 years now. I'd give it some credit. I don't know. I seem like I just rambled on about a lot of that, and there was 4 or 5 things I wanted to talk about before I started this, and to even get to discuss them, but that'll do for now. Peace.